and the living poor. This is the first lecture on both international migration and highly skilled workforce. Now, this issue of highly skilled migrants, particularly of what's called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Okay, so the STEM professionals has been long in debate in India. In fact, since the colonial days, when Dadabhai Nauroji first raised the issue of brain drain in the British Parliament. In the initial decades after independence, the emphasis was on bringing back the best Indian brains settled outside India to help the post-colonial nation building project. However, brain drain as a phenomenon did not stop. I heard from one of my friends who was who is settled in Germany and who was with the South Asia Research Institute of Heidelberg University. So he used to say that there is a popular joke amongst Indian immigrants that brains, if they do not drain, they will be in drains. So the concept of brain gain has increasingly used to support immigration from the global south. Examples have been cited of how immigration brings not only remittances, but also ideas, skills, technology, and entrepreneurship. However, I think the debate remains unsettled whether the brain drain losses outweigh any brain gain or vice versa. COVID-19 has added a new dimension to this debate. It has created once in a century kind of crisis, both humanitarian as well as developmental. How will this pandemic impact the global south, which continues to part away with a significant proportion of highly skilled professionals to the global north? Will it contribute towards the impoverishment of the global south? Methodologically, how to look at the determinants of drain and gain? What is the possibility of South-South cooperation and how they can maximize their gains? These are some of the questions we are going to get answers through this lecture. Now, with these words, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Rakesh Ranjan, to introduce the speaker briefly. Rakesh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So, thank you, Professor Binod Khadria, for accepting to deliver this lecture. And in fact, I'm personally feeling overwhelmed to have you with this Patna Center today. I can recall my initial interaction with your research, with your work, when in 2012 I tried to understand Indian diaspora engagement to India, and this was about Singapore. There was one workshop in Singapore 2012, and very first literature which I could able to identify, which was there on the internet, was your 2004 paper about migration of the highly skilled Indians, case studies of IT and health professionals. So basically, my initial idea about diaspora and migration started with this paper. Then I came across one of your best work, I think best work, The Migration of Knowledge Workers, published by Sage Publications Private Limited. So whenever we think about skill mobility, highly skilled worker, post-independence migration to West, I think we have to start from your work. We have to start from you. So I'm very glad, I'm very happy to introduce you and speak something about you. Professor Khadria has, Professor Binod Khadria has served as professor and chairperson at the Zakir Husain Center for Educational Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He has been teaching, he has been supervising students since more than 30 years, and he is a recipient of 2 prestigious fellowships, the Times of India Fellowship and the Fulbright Senior Fellowship. He also taught at universities in Australia, Japan, Singapore, Netherlands, Switzerland, France, UK, Ireland, and the US and other countries. And he has deliberated on migration issues at the General Assembly of the United Nations in Geneva and New York. In 2017-18, he held the inaugural Indian Council for Cultural Relations (ICCR) chair of Contemporary Indian Studies at Rutgers University, USA, and was a key commentator in the process that led to the United Nations Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. We know this GCM, global compact for migration. If I say something more, like something else, something more. So Professor Khadria is the author of The Migration of Knowledge Workers since 1999, based on extensive field surveys in India and the US. He was the guest editor of the special issue of Asia Population Studies on skilled diaspora in Asian development. That was, and this was published from Singapore in 2007. And he has also authored many research papers of ILO, OECD, GCIM, IRD France, ID Japan, Harvard International Review, Encyclopedia of the Indian Diaspora, and so on. I'm just saying this name, but all these papers are very important contribution by Professor Khadria to diaspora studies, or I can say completely for Indian academia or world academia. He is on editorial boards of several peer-reviewed journals and has himself edited 2 volumes of India Migration Report. In fact, when we go to JNU library to read diaspora-related books and article reports, we find India Migration Report as one of the very important source available, very important literature available in JNU library. And Professor Khadria has also co-edited two Europe and Black by Springer 2015. More recently, he has co-editor of he was the co-editor of the Sage Handbook of International Migration, published in 2019, and very important, very recent, and I think highly recommended World Migration Report 2020 by Indian International Organization for Migration. He is also in the advisory board of several international organizations and think tanks. The International Steering Committee of Metropolis International. Metropolis International, I think we should know, it is very important forum for migration scholars. He is also co-convener of Metropolis Asia and a member of UN IOM's Migration Research Leaders Syndicate. Migration Research Leaders Syndicate is some sort of kind of group or kind of forum created by IOM that actually honor top like highly skilled migration scholars in the world. I think less than 100 people have been listed in the group, and Professor Khadria is one of these. So thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. And now I request you to kindly start the lecture.
Thank you, Rakesh, for that very kind and long introduction. Many of the things I had myself forgotten, but thanks for reminding me. It has been a long journey, and I'm so glad that I'm in the company of India's youth, people like you who are taking keen interest in this subject. And also, as I could see, many of my friends, my contemporaries, my seniors are in the audience, Chandrasekhar Bhatt and others. And of course, the director of the TIS Patna Center, Pushpendraji, has spoken before me, and I think there could not have been a better introduction than what he said about the dilemmas of highly skilled migration in the coming days, in the coming decades, and so on. So I think that makes my task much easier. That background that he gave would certainly help me in contextualizing what I'm going to share with you. And I would have loved to go on talking without PowerPoint, but that I think has become an essential tool nowadays to save on time. Earlier, we used to write on board, and this was a physical contact, kind of conferences and seminars and classrooms. I think we have started missing all those environments, because that's where you have the real feel. And now we are just in front of the screen. But of course, it has its own advantages that we can interact with people across the space and across time also. So I think there is, a good trade-off between the benefits and the disadvantages of having online interaction. But I'm very happy to be here today. I must apologize that I have not been able to oblige Rakesh and Pushpendraji for a long time. This request has been there, but I think things happen when they do happen. So this is the right moment and I think the right time also for us to reflect on this subject in the context of COVID-19. Because 6 months back, when I was asked to speak, I think it was too contemporary at that time for us to understand the migration in the context of COVID, because COVID is still evolving. We don't know. Many of the things are still not known. It is an unknown territory, and this has happened after 100 years. The pandemic of the kind that Pushpendra also mentioned, that this century, this is something that is affecting all walks of life, all aspects of our, day-to-day and activities, and our different generations over the decades and so on. So we are in an unknown territory, and what I'm going to say is also, in a way, thinking aloud as what is going to be the shape of things in the context of international migration. So let me also submit that some of the things that I'm going to share with you have already been shared by either me or somebody else. So some of the knowledge here is, carrying coal to Newcastle kind of thing. It is already there, but it is good to begin there and then try to see how we can relate to things that come up in the future or likely to happen. So I'm going to share my screen and see how we go about it. Just a minute. Just give me time. PowerPoint slideshow. Yeah. Is it visible, Rakesh?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to increase the size. Let me show. Yeah. So you see, well, of course, I just thought that this is a descriptive title and with a question mark, so that I do not have all the answers that Pushpendra ji said we will get the answers. But I always share with my students and others that if you can raise a meaningful question, then that probably serves half of the task, half of the purpose. Even if you do not get all the answers, I think the quest remains. And that, I think, is the purpose of starting with a question: will the post-COVID-19 global migration of high-skilled labor immiserize the global south? Because nowadays we don't call them developed and developing countries or of that kind, or third world countries. We now say global south and the global north, although geographically speaking, not all the countries of the global north are located north of the equator. There are very important countries which are located south or on the equator, like Singapore and Japan and Korea and so on. And of course, down south, we have Australia and New Zealand. But most of the countries are in the global north geographically, and most of the global south is, of course, in the south, like the three big continents of Asia, Africa, and South America. So, of course, the Central America also becomes part of it, and the Caribbean also is part of it. So I think it is a good occasion to start with this question of post-COVID. What is post-COVID? I'll come to that, but let me first of all share with you this map. This is a new map of the world in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if you look at this, it also gives us a view of the global north and the south. The dark blue colored countries are all part of the global north. And then, of course, if you come to the right-hand side, and it is also wrapped downwards, if you come to Japan and South Korea and Singapore and so on, and Australia and New Zealand, these are all part of the global north. And then we are left with the three continents as a global south. One can divide that Central America, and then of course Africa can be divided, North Africa and of course south of Sahara, and similarly Middle East, and then Iran and Afghanistan, All those countries are there. China is a big country like India with a huge population. And then we have tiny island countries like Singapore and so on in the global north. So having shared this, I share with you a table which is now perhaps little dated, although not entirely dated, because this is uh, from the International Migration Report 2019. And this data, now we have highlights from the 2020 also. But the basic purpose of this are not to share the figures as such. The figures are more or less, they remain the same, slightly increasing the total stock, percentage remains more percentage of population, migrant population as a percentage of total population, and all those compositions and median age and female migration. These are important categories. In terms of their dimensions, those who are working with the data, they of course need those dimensions. But right now, for the purpose of today's discussion, that I think is, subsidiary. So we have 2000 and 2019 data on this. Those who are interested can see that in 2019, the total number of migrants was 271 million. Those people who are not in their country of birth for at least a year. I don't have to go back to these definitions, but they are important to be kept in mind. And then on the left-hand side, if you see, then we have these categories: more developed countries, less developed, and within less developed, we have least developed, and then we have excluding least developed countries. So this is how data need to be understood. You can also look at them as high-income countries, middle-income, and low-income countries. And there are some countries for which data are not available. Then we have Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, Caribbean, North America, Oceania, continent-wise. So we can reclassify them in terms of the global north and the global south. That is possible. But what we have here is the median age of international migrants, which was 39 years of age, median, which is the average in 2019. We need to understand what is going to happen to this age over in the post-COVID era. That is very important. At the same time, we also need to understand the intra-SDD region migration, whether there will be migration always from the global south to the global north, or there will be south-south migration, north-north migration, and so on. So those categories are very, very important. I think one can juggle with them and see how the scenario changes. That I think is something interesting. But what is not there in most of the reports are these data. The earlier data are by destination. That's why I've put it on the red at the top, that destination-wise, global immigration. This is immigration-based data. Migrants are coming inside. If you say Africa, then these numbers are migrants in Africa from other countries. If we say Asia, then these are migrants in Asia from other countries. And so if you go into disaggregating them, then you will end up into country names. So India, South Asian, other countries, and so on. Those are all inward migration data that has to be understood properly. I hope that the migration scholars take note of this very simple distinction. This is something which we don't come across very usually. This is the origin-wise data. And these are the Africa, Asia, Europe, all these continent-wise data are immigration data, out migration data. That these are the people who are going out of these countries. And this, we have total population, of course, the population of those continents, and percentage of the global population, of course. And then we have international migrants by origin. So that number is very, very important. This is, by the way, I don't have data for even 2019. This is 2017 data. But these are a purpose in understanding and following and creating a time series that you should all try to do that. And you can look at percentage of international migrants origin-wise. Asia, of course, has 41%. It is sending 41% of the world migrants to the rest of the world. And then you have Europe, which is 23% sending, and Latin America 14%, Africa 14%, and so on. And then there are some unknown also. So if we look at 2020, which is a digression from 1919, where are they coming from? And they are coming from, of course, India has been listed as still the largest country of the diaspora. The 18 million does not count the NRIs or the vice versa. It counts the NRIs and not the diaspora. This is always intriguing me, and I think now the International Migration Report has started using the term diaspora without defining it. And that creates a confusion whether they are all citizens of the country where they're living or they're citizens of the country of origin, continuing to live as expatriates. That is something that we should keep asking and trying to find an answer. India's total number of people living abroad of Indian origin are close to 32 million. So that's the number. And then we have Russian Federation, number 2, 11 million, Mexico, similar number, China, 10 million, Syrian Arab Republic, 8 million, that I think a large number of them are refugees. So that is where we have the origins, and the fastest growing origins are in the global south. If we take the last 2 decades, then we find that India's largest gain, India has doubled, almost doubled. Last century when India had counted with the high-level committee report recommended that India should count. That time it was counted as 20 million. But that again comprised both the NRIs and the citizens of other countries. So here it is only one category, which I think it is the citizens of India who are living abroad as migrants, and that has gone up almost doubled from 10 million to 18 million in 2 decades. And then you have other countries like Syria, Venezuela, China, Philippines. I don't have to give those numbers, but one can always figure them out. Destination-wise, 2020, the number now we have 281 rather than 272. This number is increasing. What is being suspected now in post-COVID is that this number might go down first time ever in history. In fact, when I was speaking at the UN General Assembly in 2017 for the GCM debate, consultation by the member countries, one member country had raised a concern that the total number of migrants is increasing. And I actually made a comment on that makes me think myself to be a foolish today, because I said, of course, number of migrants would go on increasing. That's not a cause of concern. It is the flow, not the stock, which is a cause of concern. And this is a stock. So we need to understand what is the stock and what is the flow data that is there. But today, I am made to think that even the stock number can go down. If there are a large number of deaths that is happening in COVID-19, then we find that that can happen. And no new migrants are added because of the lockdown, then that can actually be the current or oncoming scenario, may be less than 281 million. That's a question mark, but let us be prepared for that. And then the percentage may still remain the same, because your denominator and numerator are both going down. You still remain the same percentage, because when people are dying, the COVID is not making a distinction between migrants and the local population. So both sides, there may be a reduction in the size. And so if we look at that, the largest number of international migrants are in Europe, 87 million. Again, this is destination. And then North America comes second, and third is North Africa and West Asia, because we talk about Gulf countries and so on. So these are part of that. And North Africa, of course, the north of Sahara, the countries, Libya and all those countries are also attracting migrants. Okay, country-wise, those were continent-wise. Country-wise, if we look at that, then 2020, which is already in the, in COVID, because the COVID started in December 2019. And so if we have 2020 figures, then we are already although the lockdown started much later in March in India, but I think we were already knee deep into COVID by that time. So United States of America is one of the largest host country, 18% of the world's total migrants, 51 million, followed by Germany, around 16 million, then Saudi Arabia, 13 million, Russian Federation, 12 million, and United Kingdom, 9 million. One can get the entire range of countries in terms of this. Those data are available, but in post-COVID, I'm not sure how much of that data would be in the public domain. So one has to be ready for those challenges as well. So let's now, having got this background, this context in terms of the dimension and how this is likely to change, how the stock may go down, how the flow may change, how the countries may take on to different roles. The origin countries can become destination countries can become origin countries, and there can be a churning of the whole thing. Let's look at the trajectory, at the history of the global agenda of making of the global compact for migration, because that is the last bit of the policy, big policy, global policy on the agenda, which is yet to be implemented fully. So I am calling it from fission to fusion between the global north and the global south. Because there has always been a divide between these two segments in terms of origin countries and destination countries. Most global south countries where origin countries have been origin countries, and most global north as destination countries. But there has been always conflict of interest. So it was fission between the two, the conflict, but it was progressing towards fusion. There has been a great deal of effort by the UN bodies for this. But what we found that in Millennium Development Goal in the 2000, which was a millennium agenda of the development for next 15 years, the onus was only on the global south countries to eliminate global poverty, to eliminate hunger, to eliminate inequality, ignorance, poor health, and drinking water, and decent jobs, and all that. Eight Millennium Development Goals were there, but migration was not part of it. Although the onus was on South countries who were suffering this migration, out migration, it was not on the agenda. Why? That was because although international subjects like trade, technology, education, and so on were discussed on the multilateral negotiations, migration was always considered too dangerous for the sovereignty of the member states to put it on the UN agenda. That, I think, has been the major reason, and it continues to be so. That's why there is hesitation on the part of the countries to, even share what they are going to do, and even to give a undertaking that their policy would remain stable for next 5 years or so on. So in 2002, the Global Commission on International Migration was set up by Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the Security Council, for a limited period of 3 years. And that is where he played a trick, a very smart game, to put it on the development agenda as part of the development agenda. Migration as a part of development agenda, piggybacked on development. And that's how people, countries started talking about it, at least. After 3 years, the report had come, and it was a very positive and hopeful report, although it was very, I would call it very ambitious in terms of how it was, distant from reality. We will come to that later on. But it led to the 2006 high-level dialogue on migration and development. The countries agreed to come on the table, on the multilateral table for negotiations, and discuss migration in the context of development. And then it was proposed that every year there would be a global forum on migration and development. It would take place between governments, between civil society members and policymakers and scholars and so on. And it would happen once in a developed countries, followed by next year in a developing countries. First one was in Brussels, and I think 2 years back, perhaps it was in Bangladesh. So it has been alternating between these countries. And then we finally, Millennium Development Goal period is over. We come to 2015, Sustainable Development Goals, with 17 goals, 169 targets, but the onus of implementation was on both global South countries and global North countries. That was the major distinction, because the North countries were otherwise not part of it. And if the destination countries are not taking part, then you can't make progress. That, I think, is a major progress that could be made. But again, migration missed the bus on the UN global agenda. We had to use the magnifying glass to find the word migration in hidden in some 169 targets somewhere. And people were shy to call a spade and say that, well, it is not part of the 17 agenda. They were taking, some kind of a solace to say that it is there in such and such target and such target. Of course, I think I was a few years younger than today that time, and perhaps more outspoken. And I was speaking in Mexico for the Metropolis Conference, a plenary lecture. And I said first time it's a tragedy and second time it's a farce. And to my great, surprise, I found a standing ovation from the audience, that they were so otherwise so much, got used to the stereotypical dialogue and conversation, that this was a fresh air, a breath of fresh air to actually, challenge what is happening. Of course, the civil society expression of that resentment had snowballed to hopefully reach the United Nations ears. But I don't think civil society expressions are strong enough or given that much of importance. It was something else that brought migration on the agenda through the back door. And that was the 2000 turning point towards the fusion and breaking the barriers. I'm putting a question mark again. It was the 2015-16 Syrian refugee crisis that actually gave the awakening call to the United Nations and its members. And that is how in 2016, the UN high-level summit on large movement of refugees and migrants led to the creation of two compacts, the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Compact for Migration. These are the two main compacts that were brought through the back door on the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. That I think we need to understand. So it was, and this time, the remarkable aspect was that it was not piggybacking on begging on development agenda. It was standing on its own feet and asking for recognition. And so the next year in 2017, IOM, the International Organization for Migration, which was an intergovernmental body until then, was given the status of a UN migration agency and was given the charge of implementing Global Compact for safe, regular, orderly and regular migration. But soon enough, well, it was Trump's America. US withdrew from the GCM, but it continued 2016, 2018. The final draft was accepted by 192 member states, one less. Then Hungary also withdrew. And the final debate at civil society debate at Geneva was in September 2018. In December, this GCM was formally accepted at Marrakesh, Morocco, during the Global Forum on Migration and Development. This is in brief the background. And then the rest of it, you all are familiar what has been going on. Simultaneously, Europe was divided over the Syrian crisis. Germany was very much pro refugees, but Hungary, Austria, and other countries were very much against it. So you can see how race relations, are important in this migration business. That is very, very important. And I'm sure, we will hear a lot of these discourses in times to come, because different organizations, different agencies are actually keeping the pot boiling. 2016, we heard about Brexit because England wanted to sever its relations with European Union, because large number of European labor, and youth were getting jobs in England, and they thought they are robbing them. I don't know whether that's correct or not. Scotland referendum, Scotland wanted to sever its relationship with England itself, Catalonia in Spain, Austria's Operation Sovereign Borders. All these are different stories in different continents. Mexico wall, US travel ban from 7 Islamic countries that Trump had imposed. Myanmar Rohingya expulsion took place next door to us, and Bangladesh in India, Bangladeshis in India was a big issue. So National Register of Citizens in the northeast of India, particularly Assam, and there was, massive miscalculations in that counting. And then came the Citizenship Amendment Bill, and then Citizenship Amendment Act, which actually led to riots and very widespread public agitation. Before that could snowball, uh, COVID came. 2020, COVID-19 19 led to the lockdown, travel restrictions, visa suspensions, and so on and so forth. And then we have seen that evacuation flights taking place. Now we hear about vaccine passports. And today only Pushpendraji was asking me that if I was planning to visit some countries, then what about the vaccine that I have taken? And I very proudly, I said, well, I have taken Covishield. And he said, which variety? Is it Indian made? Then it may not be acceptable. So you can see there are wheels within wheels. You can never be free from these entanglements. Post-COVID return to high degree of selectivity in immigration policy. This is what the crux is of this particular lecture. What is it that is making the immigration policies go back to being selective and actually, put more fuel into the fire of the brain drain, which was subsiding. So to say, I never believed that it ever subsided, but it was put under some covers in new kind of names like brain gain and so on. So now I think it's going to be difficult to go on covering up that. OECD, large number of countries, USA, in February 2020, it was still under Trump. The US Department of Homeland Security implemented the inadmissibility on public charge grounds of their likelihood of becoming a public charge at any time in the future. If temporary migrants are taking support from American funding for their health and other kind of protections, then they will not be allowed to come in. That was a big change. And then foreigners seeking an extension or stay or change of status must demonstrate that they have not received public benefits over the designated threshold since obtaining the non-immigrant status they seek to extend or change. So that was not applicable only for the new temporary migrants, even the continuing temporary migrants, if their visas were over, they were renewing or they were changing their status, then they had to prove that they were not a charge on the public funding. USA continues. In June 2020, President Trump issued a proclamation, that is the executive order extending and expanding the suspension of certain kind of visas. Even H-1B visa was targeted, and F-1 visa was also in the firing line. It was another matter that both these were saved by the strong position that the corporate sector in the USA took, and the big universities took about students, that these were attractive. So the proclamation, as I said here, H-1B, H-2B, L visas and J-1 visa, J-2 visas, all kinds of visas were hit by this. And we thought that with Trump gone, we probably have a better era dawning. That did not happen. That was very, very temporary. Beginning March 4, 2021, a couple of months ago, the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris administration suspended the entry of foreign citizens who have recently been in India for 14 days or more, and certain other impacted countries. Schengen countries, Brazil, China, and so on. These countries were on this list, and India was added on 30th of April, and it was effective from 4th of March. And that is one of the reasons I had to cancel my tickets to USA 3 or 4 times, and I still have not got my refunds back from Air India. So you don't have unlimited money to keep on buying new tickets. And you can see I'm not alone, and many people are stuck in different situations, elderly people, and then students going to miss their semester. And so it's a whole mess that has happened. But country like United States has put all of us in one single basket for the same region, one singular region, which probably is not true for all the countries. So you take a broad brush and paint them just black, you know. So non-essential travel is restricted. Legal permanent residents and foreign citizens holding certain visas are still admitted. Who are they? That is the question. Who are the certain visa holders that are allowed? High skill exceptions. That is the crux of this lecture. The highly skilled ones are the exceptions. They can go. Any non-citizen whose entry would be in the national interest of the United States, as determined by the Secretary of State, that's the Foreign Office, the Secretary of Homeland Security, that is the Immigration Office, and its designees, all other stakeholders. If they certify that these are people who are coming to the country in America's national interest, then they will not bring COVID. They don't have to worry about that. That are our COVID warriors, our doctors, our nurses. Those are the people. We are going to lose them. That is what is happening. Certain business travelers, investors, treaty traders, academic students, and journalists may also qualify for national interest exception under the presidential proclamation covering from these countries I just named: Schengen, UK, Ireland, Brazil, China, India, and so on. Students traveling with valid F1, M1 visas, they do not need to contact embassy or consulate to seek an individual national interest exception certificate. They don't even need, because these countries want future workers, and the future workers are the present students. That we need to understand. We boast we are the world's largest senders of students. We are the world's largest sender of diaspora. We are going to cry one day and shed our tears for that. That is what is going to happen. We are not, becoming smart by saying that this is good for us. If otherwise they are qualified, the students, they automatically considered as part of the national interest exception to travel. So that is what is happening. And more national interest exemptions are there. United States related humanitarian travel. Of course, that is important. Public health response and national security. Now, what is that national security? National security can mean financial hardship to an employer. If a company cannot run without immigrants, high-skilled immigrants, and they cannot run remotely by offline or online, and work from home from another country, then they would be allowed to come in. That is in national security concern. So I don't grudge those countries, because they are, after all, protecting their own interest. It is the global South countries who are not aware what lies in their interest. That is what is worrying, and what measures they should take is important. Canada is the same story. Canada also has closed its borders, but exceptions are the nurses. Nurses can come because aging has taken place. Caregivers are necessary. And who are the caregivers? The nurses are the caregivers. And so that is what. And then, of course, you need future workers, the students. All that is there. The promulgation of the such post-COVID migration policies by the global North OECD countries have taken place in the face of worsening pre-COVID comparative situation in global South, like in South Asia and other countries. And that's what I'm going to share with you. Pre-COVID, what was the situation in the global South, and is it going to become better or worse in the post-COVID after the migration? So level of preparedness in South Asia to COVID-19. And these are the indicators. Government health expenditure as a percentage of GDP, hospital beds per 1,000 people, nurses and midwives per 1,000 people, and physicians per 1,000 people. Now you can see the countries, most of them are South Asian countries, and then you have OECD member countries, which is for comparison, and then you also have East Asia and the Pacific, which are part of the global South. Now you see the inequality within the global South and vis-a-vis global North, which is OECD countries. Government health expenditure percentage, OECD 7.52% of the GDP goes into health expenditure, and look at East Asia and Pacific also 4.54 and world 5.8. And where are we? Excepting for Maldives and perhaps Bhutan and Sri Lanka, all of them are decimal points. They are less than 1. And that, I think, is something which needs to be worried about. Maldives is such a small island country, 5.21 does not make much sense. And similarly, Sri Lanka always had a good track record on health. And Bhutan is another landlocked, Himalayan country. The air is pure there anyway. Hospital beds, you can see the world is 2.7, East Asia and Pacific 3.7, OECD 4.13. And none of the Asian countries are close to that, except in Sri Lanka and Maldives again, and Bhutan. All them are decimal points. Nurses and midwives, same story, and physicians per 1,000 population is the same story. I think the time is running out, so I would quickly go through these. I think these are easily available, and one can fish for these data. Social security coverage. Japan is, for comparison, one of the OECD countries. 95% of the population is covered by social security. Share of total employment. 95% of the employed people have social security. Turkey, part of the EU countries, an Asian country, but part of EU, 58%, 59%. World average is 41%, and then even China is only 33.5%. And then we have all those countries which are negligible numbers. India is 10.3. This is pre-COVID. And post-COVID, we don't know. It perhaps is going to go down because a large part of the social security is provided by the private sector. And the private sector is not in a position to provide this because their business is down. And the government is busy in other things. Government's priorities is not people. That is something very, very important to be taken into account. Social security protection lower than in Asia Pacific average. See, look at these countries, Laos, Philippines, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, all of them are part of the global South. And then on the left-hand side, you have South Asia, and then you have better ones. Only Sri Lanka is close to or more than Asia Pacific average. Thailand is just enough. Turkey and Iran are higher than that, but they are not equal to the global average. Post-COVID scenario on remittances, equipment, and return migration. Fall in remittances. India had 83 billion, and they say there will be a 23% fall in remittances to India. Large part of our discourse, we have such an obsession with remittances that we only talk about remittances, but the dimension, the volume, and now perhaps people are talking about the cost of remittances, that it should be less than 6%, but it is much more than that. But we don't know how to use it. We don't have a policy. We don't even know how remittance takes place. How is it constructed? Who is deprived when remittance takes place? Who gains is, of course, we discuss. Which are the countries? Kerala gets so much of percentage and such, all other states, we have all those data. But poor migrant, what is happening to his health and living condition when remittances are coming from the saving? Is depriving himself or herself. That is nobody's talking, just nobody's business. Students migration takes place. Who pays for that? 9% of India's remittances go back. for the living cost of the students. Well, those are long stories. Return of technology. Well, I think return of technology, it was all obsolete technology that was coming back to India. Dumping was taking place. And now when we need state-of-the-art medical equipments, we can't even purchase them. We pass on the buck to the states, say that you do the negotiations. So all those, starting from masks to respirators to diagnostic tests, gloves, gowns, PPE, ventilators, all these, have been issues during the COVID. And we, of course, made, strides in some areas where PPEs were, stitched by the domestic unemployed people. Return migration with value eroded human capital, not value added human capital. These are the people who are sucked and evacuated, who are sacked and evacuated without payment of wages. They are the people who are coming back from Gulf countries, wage theft is taking place and all that. Is that brain gain? Question mark. I mean, but people would put that return migration in the same basket, saying this is brain gain. Post-COVID-19 impact, extent of fall in remittances. I have talked about it. It is, it is in all countries. You can see on the left-hand side panel, you see 2020 expected fall in the remittances. South Asia as a whole, 22% fall. India 23%, Pakistan 23%, Bangladesh 22%. Bangladesh, by the way, thrives on remittances. A large part of its GDP is made of remittances, and if it has 22% fall, that's going to be very serious. Nepal 14% and Sri Lanka 19%. So you can see even the talk of the town about remittances is getting hit. We thought we would always remain at the top, not necessarily. Potential job losses in millions due to lockdown. 112, 113 million in India, 12 million in Bangladesh, Nepal 2 million, 12 million in Pakistan, and Sri Lanka 1 million. These are numbers, but what are the stories behind those numbers when people lose their jobs, income, household, survival, food, everything, medicine, everything is affected. Post-COVID-19 impact, job loss sectors and worst hit groups. You can see there, I've listed tourism, MSME, construction, transportation, other informal sector, retail, agriculture, others. What is left then? And then you have what are the regions, what are the, not the regions, population groups likely to be worst affected in South Asia, which is part of Global South, migrant workers, daily wage workers, self-employed, MSME, public health workers, including nursing, maintenance, and so on, gig economy workers, and others. And we see on the left-hand side, fiscal measures that have been given. Look at Japan, 42% of the GDP is given as a fiscal measure. And Singapore also 19%. And then if we look at other countries, then India is 10%. But if you look at the right-hand panel, then India actually is deficit by 4 percentage points. India needs 14% of GDP. If you put economic revival, social protection, public health infrastructure, all these put together, 14% of the GDP is necessary, but India's allocation was only 10%. And similarly, if you look at all the countries are deficit. Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, these are the figures. But let me save time by saying that none of the countries have actually surpassed the required proportions of the GDP. Why? Because your producers are not here. And if they are here, they are unemployed. They are getting employed in other countries. So pre and post COVID-19 indifference, discrimination between skilled and unskilled migrant labor is continuing. That is the selective migration policy is not allowing unskilled migration and semi-skilled and middle-level workers to come and earn money and livelihood, but only high-skilled migrants are allowed and attracted. And this is a continuation from 2005 observation of the GCIM report, Global Commission for International Migration report. The traditional distinction between skilled and unskilled workers is in uncertain respects an unhelpful one and fails to do justice to the complexity of international migration, because they may have different levels of education, but all of them could be legitimately described as essential workers. Now, this definition, UN definition of essential workers, is different from what the US consulate would call essential workers for national interest. That, I think, is something to be taken into account. Visa instability in visa trends. You don't know when the policy is going to change overnight. We don't know. Open and shut policy, and the vulnerability, the arbitrariness of return, and stigma of integration. These are all now going to go up. These incidences are going to go up. And worsening of the macro drivers of temporary immigration, that is destination country immigration, restrictions are increasingly driven by security concern. And you thought security concern means defense? No, security concern means their industry, employment in the industry. If the industry is likely to shut down, then they would allow those workers to go. Economic advantage, that they would be earning much more in the global trade. That, I think, is if the workers are producing goods which are tradable in the global exchange, then they will be allowed to come in. And social cohesion. Of course, if they have to learn the language, they have to follow the local culture and so on. We thought that assimilation was substituted by the word integration, and then it was by social cohesion. But I think we're going back to the question and issue of assimilation again. Challenge to the GCM goal. The common trend for migration is to become not safe, orderly, and regular, but unsafe, disorderly, and irregular. And undoing, this would be leading to the undoing of SDG number 10, reduce inequalities, leaving no one behind. That will not happen. Inequalities are going to increase. The schism between the global north and the global south is likely to widen. Economic growth outlet, look, you have IMF figures, World Bank figures, and then you have UN ESCAP figures here for 2020. And IMF are revised figures also. So all these countries are in the global south, particularly in South Asia. And you can see many of these countries have a minus sign in front of them. India, for example, is forecast to be having a negative growth rate of 3.2, 8.1 by IMF. -1, 8.1 for Maldives, -10.5 for Maldives. But if you look at Afghanistan, for example, that is also important from security point of view. And look at Bhutan also. Bhutan perhaps will sustain, but Pakistan is again in the red, and Sri Lanka is in the red. So if there is a deceleration in the growth rate, then that is going to impact these countries in a very, very negative way. Reduction of opportunities to regions for slowdown of economic activity due to COVID-19, or reduction of opportunities to meet new customers. You can't meet the new customers, then challenges in logistics and shipping of products. That is, if flights are not taking place, cargo flights are not taking place, then how to send products? Lack of operational cash flow, transactions are not happening, difficulties in obtaining supplies of raw materials, drop in demand for products and services, workers cannot return to work as business is closed. So we should not be living in the fool's paradise that COVID is over. We are in for the third wave, and this third wave is going to be again global. That, I think, is very, very important. We can think of the median age, how median age is going to be changing. So far, the median age, global north was 44, 43, 41 years, 42 years. And the global south median age of the migrants was 31, 34 years. This is going to just somersault, completely opposite, because the global north countries are going to attract the youth and send back older workers, so that the average age of the migrants in the global south is going to increase. that in the global north is going to go down. This aging process is also have a gender impact, a gender specific demand for caregiving, and that's why women are now comprising large part of the migrants. 48% of all international migrants are women in 2020, and they are going independently without their families and without their spouses are also likely to go. In fact, the elderly women are coming back to look after the left behind children. So finally, I would say that there is a trinity of dynamic conflicts that I have been talking about for more than a decade. And in the post-COVID migration policies, this is going to become transparent. This is going to become very obvious. It was hidden so far, but now it is going to be visible, and that would lead to the immiserization of the global south. Aging, I have said, so aging means the younger population of younger people in the global south would be sucked in by the global north. And that is because with the demographic changes, AST lead to age structural transformation, temporization of migration, because this has to be a continuous process. You know, the migrants, older migrants have to be sent back home and younger ones have to be attracted. So temporary migration would help in that. And when temporary migration takes place, families don't go. So separation of the family. Their wages are going to be lower because it is not wage only, it is the total wages bill. Their wages and salaries, their pensions and their perks, all of them are going to be low. There will be no pension because they are temporary. And there will be no perks because perk is based on seniority. They are going to be younger workers. But the crux is that when wage is low, the cost of production of goods and services in international trade is going to be low, and they are going to have the competitive advantage, which should work against the global south, because the competitive advantage in global south would be evaporating. And vintage is accumulated knowledge that would actually migrate through students, because students carry the latest vintage of knowledge with them, and they call it, they call it recruitment of students. It's not recruitment of students, it's recruitment of future workers. And that's why I call it Freudian slip. I think immiserization of the global south is imminent, but how long it would take, that is important. If we are wise enough, we must raise our voice, create some noise, and take it to the platform of global compact for migration. Short of that, I think global south is not going to regain its territory. It's again starting selectivity in migration policy is going to make a big comeback, and we'll be back to square one where we started about 2 decades ago. Thank you. I've taken a little longer, but hopefully we'll have enough to.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Khadria, for this very enriching lecture. And you have actually answered, or at least hinted what answers would be of the questions which I initially posed. And this trinity of conflicts which you have explained, that gives the answer. So how this impoverishment or immiserization is going to happen. Thank you very much for this. We have questions, and so without wasting any time, I would like to invite one of my TIS Mumbai colleague, Sandhya Iyer. She has several questions, so I thought instead of I reading all those questions, better invite Sandhya. Yes, good evening, Sandhya.
Yeah, good evening. And,
yes, and you have your questions, and Professor Khadria is here. Okay.
No, I would like to first of all thank TIS Patna Center for bringing such an important question on the table. And I think I was like a student sitting here making notes down when Binod Khadria ji was speaking, and hence you could see that spluttering of questions there. And certainly very difficult situation. I think where we are reaching right now in the post-pandemic time, I think the idea of migration, which was seen as bringing in global cosmopolitanism, I think that's also going to be questioned as we move forward. So thank you so much, Binodji, for stimulating us and pushing us to the wall to think more seriously about what should be the response of Global South. And I think we have to be more serious about the India chapter from here on. I think the India question is going to be very serious. But frankly, sir, I was wondering what is happening the last 2.5 months from the global north. If you look at the way in which Germany, Canada, for that matter of fact, New Zealand, I wouldn't call it north, but yes, developed, if I may use that category over here, have been relaxing a range of visa norms the moment they came out of the second wave. And they also started playing on the vaccination diplomacy very, very powerfully. Suddenly, you find them playing a very serious role in, asking the WHO also to recognize India's vaccination drive. So the fundamental question which comes to my mind is, how do you really, look at this transformation in the idea of how they're attracting entrepreneurs, how they're attracting high-skilled workers, and since innovation is the process, I see Canada and Germany doing it very seriously, inviting high-skilled workers and relaxing norms there, giving permanent, identity, citizenships, etc. That's the first question. How do you really see it shaping in the larger global migration syndrome? The other point is, what do you see as the response of the South-South migration framework here? Uh, we were always seeing neighborhood migration taking place in a very strong manner, particularly when it comes to women workers. They were coming only to neighborhoods, right? What is the gendered, impact you see in the post-COVID reality? Are women going to be able to migrate even to the neighbor, or even that's going to be curbed? And the last question, which again stems from one of our recent papers, which is it will come out in some time. It's already on review process. Is that we are seeing a very serious impact on the unskilled migration process, where undisclosed migration was very heavy. And now with the COVID-19 restrictions coming around in a very, very strong manner, and the constraints on human security inter alia associated, uh, that's my last question. How do you really understand the nature of unskilled workers? So the immiserization that you were talking about, how do you really engage with such a difficult situation now? Because we are talking about a visible brain drain which is likely to take place. How does India prepare for it? So I hope my questions are not sounding like a person sitting in the,
No,
I became very, it was very important for me to understand them. So thank you so much.
uh, Pushpendraji, should I take on
Yes,
some questions?
yes,
I
yeah.
think this is certainly a handful of questions. These are very important points rather than just questions. The global cosmopolitanism, is a hoax. That is what you said. I'm glad you used that term, global cosmopolitan, and I would be happy to join you to call it a hoax. That does not happen. Um, 2.5 months, you said, the scenario has changed over last 2.5 months,
Yeah.
because you see most of these countries in the global north, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Netherlands, Denmark, all these countries, their time horizon is very long.
Yeah.
Their vision is long. They think 50 years in advance is
Yes.
going to come.
Yeah.
And that is why they are strong. And that is where the divide is. We cannot even manage 5 years, what's up even 5-year planning. So
Right.
that is why certainly I do not blame them. They of course have to work in their own interest. If they do not work in their interest, then why should they expect India or Pakistan to go and give them policy decisions or policy? It is us. We depend on others. We depend on very expensive foreign experts who know nothing about India. They come and spend some holiday time here and give us, sermons, what we should do. That happens because of vested interest. That happens because of vested. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. That is the vested interest. So that is where I think we cannot play with the lives of the people. As long as it is not life and livelihood, it is some other things, then you can take, liberty with that, but not with this, because post-COVID is not coming out of the COVID hospital. You just try to find out what the COVID patients are going through afterwards. The post-COVID syndrome that they are going through are not known to us. All kinds of diabetes, all kinds of diseases, all kinds of their vulnerabilities are just coming up. The black fungus was just one of the visible things, but there are so many other invisible implications that we are not aware. We just try to be wiser and smart when the thing has happened. We do not anticipate. Why this crisis happened about oxygen, and why people died because of lack of oxygen.
Right.
So anticipation is it's like driving on this road. You can avoid accident only if you anticipate the behavior of the other drivers. If you do not anticipate, then you would not know how to drive. Other day, I came across a joke. It is fresh in my mind. I have heard it before also. A woman was learning how to drive, and the driver asked, "You are going at 60 miles per hour, and right in front you see your husband and your good friend. Then the question is, what are you going to hit?" And the woman says, "Obviously the husband." That's the joke. That's the joke. But the joke is not ending there. The driver said, "My God, you will hit the brake." Neither of the two you are going to hit. You have to hit the brake. So this is how we answer. We choose between two options which are not our options. We don't do exactly what is needed. That is what is important to do. So we should negotiate with these countries that we will send our doctors, we will send our nurses, but on a rotational basis. I've been talking about it. I have said about the global health keeping force. Thereby our doctors and nurses can spend 6 months or 3 months, and then they can earn that much extra money. They will come back and others will go, so that more families would benefit from that also. Right. Now only the lucky ones get it, and the unlucky ones can never go. So we have to think of them as the global common. They are the global common scarce resources. The STEM is a global common scarce resource. Scientists, engineers, mathematicians, all of them are scarce resources. Some of them are giving us healthcare when the COVID strikes. Others help us in preventing it. They invent, they create the vaccine. They are the scientists. And the social scientists are also part of that. When we call them scientists, we need to know the data. If you look at the American data, S&T, then social scientists are part of the scientists. So they have a big role to play. Mental health is very important. Depression, anti-depression, consultation. All those things are very important. And this can happen not in isolation. It can happen by joining hands. Now, if I become smart and think about only 3 days, then I will give up my scarce resources in the name of sharing and feeling proud about it. But if I think of 30 days or 3 years from now, then I will preserve it. Part of it I'll preserve, and I will actually negotiate a deal. I'll give you this, you give me the other thing. So that is what is needed. I don't say it should be charity. Charity does not go very far. It can happen once.
But sir, this just a small comment. Given the developmental crisis that India is going through, and our post recovery is going to take much longer with lives and livelihoods. Wouldn't it be of a greater need for us to revisit our migration idea itself? Because the nature in which we are trying, the lack of jobs which are available, which is taking place internally, migration becomes like an easy solution for any state-led policy to kind of adhere to them and take it further, isn't it?
What I'm going to tell you is that you need to divide it into immediate term, medium term, long term, and very long term. This is how things can happen. But we just put everything in the same basket and mess it up.
Yeah.
That is what is happening now. When you are saying whether we should do not, now of course we should do, but how and who will do it? That is what is important. People like you or Tata Institute of Social Sciences should start a course on this, should give training to our politicians,
Absolutely,
to our bureaucrats who are making the policy.
right.
They should not live in ivory towers and depend only on foreign experts who know nothing about our country.
Right. No, migration has always been a residue of developmental debate. I think we have to take it in the center stage now,
Yeah,
and start having a stronger framework of debating.
exactly. So I don't think we have easy solutions. We can just say this should happen, that should happen. But how and who will do it is very important.
Right. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, Professor Khadria, we have 5 more questions. I would like to invite first Basant Potnuru. He has a question.
Okay.
If he's there.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Thank you for giving the opportunity. It says that my question was, since the theory of migration hump has turned out to be not true, at least for China and also partly for India, as immigration in these countries accelerated despite rapid increase in their national incomes rather than slowing down, then what is the way out of brain drain that you see?
I just answered Basant this question indirectly. There is no easy answer. Certainly there are conflicts, many wheels within wheels. What are you going to do to tell are you going to tell the doctor that don't go? Are you going to tell your son or daughter don't go abroad? You cannot do that because they have their aspirations, ambitions. They have to excel. They have to go to the best place for education. They have to go to the best place for their employment and so on. So there is a conflict between individual and society. That has to be addressed. So for that, one has to innovate. And that innovation cannot come overnight. For that, one has to put minds together and experiment. When we experiment, we may fail. Then we come up with another innovation. That is how it has to be. So why is it brain drain? It is brain drain because we have invested time, money, and our resources in the generation of those skills because they are needed here. But we don't want to curtail their liberty. We are in a globalized world, and that's where they have to go. But they can come back. We have to create those conditions that they can come back. If not forever, they can come back and spend some time here. Those are the answers. Those answers, we have been talking about those answers for a very long time. I don't think we actually mean business to actually implement them. You have to have patience to implement them. It may not succeed at the first go, then you have to tinker with something and then apply again. But we throw the baby with the bathwater. If it does not succeed, we throw away good things also. So I think the answers to brain drain would evolve from the people themselves, those who are going abroad, how they want to come and contribute to the country. They do. They'll be happy to contribute to the country. But Jagdish Bhagwati had started this brain drain tax he talked about. Nothing happened. Why nothing happened? Because it was a juridical problem to introduce that kind of resources that 10% of the surcharge tax surcharge on the tax payable should be transferred to the origin countries, and the matching grant can be given by that country. Those are very lofty ideas. We should not forget that those lofty ideas nobody is concerned. We have to compete. We have to grab it. We have to demand it. So beg, borrow, or steal. Beg, borrow, or steal is the dictum that will work. Only sermon will not work.
Professor Khadria, there is one question by Badshah Sarkar, which I think you have already answered, but he would like to know if you want to add anything on the future trend because of the online work. So what will be the impact on future migration trend of increasing online work through various platforms?
Okay. See, certainly, like you had heard me just now, spelling the national security concern of the United States. And then they explain that national security concern implies if an employer cannot run his or her business, without the migrant worker, and remote work is not the answer, then they would allow them exemption from travel restrictions. So that is where the answer lies. So those occupations, those professions where you need physical contact will be more in demand. They will also trigger a shift in demand for that kind of education, because there is going to be fatigue. The remote work and work from home is going to lead to other kinds of problems, fatigue, depression, and other things that are going to happen. So you need to interact with people physically. That would happen if the doctors and nurses are allowed to move physically. You will find tomorrow the parents of the new generations would try to put their children into those lines of specialization, rather than asking them to become IAS officers or IFS officers, or those who cannot move, teachers are like you and me are going to be hit. We'll be asked to remain confined in our rooms and give our lectures from here. But scientists who need laboratories, they will have to go physically. So I think there is going to be an overhaul of the nature of work. Nature of work is going to undergo a big change. That would also give us a lead in terms of what would be the form of new migration. For example, the garbage disposal, can it happen by online? Garbage disposal, can it happen? It cannot happen. Or elderly care, the nurse has to be there. So those will be the professions. Even in the unskilled category, like Sanjay had asked, unskilled category people would like to be garbage pickers rather than a mechanic who can give instructions online and get the machine rolling again, but not migrate himself or herself.
Professor Khadria, there are two questions by S.K. Nayak. One question is, can you give any, say, example of any country which has stopped high-skilled people leaving the country? And he says that his own research shows none. And the second question is, any example of a country where brain drain has been compensated in monetary terms by the recipient country? Then next I will come to a comment by Professor Siv Prasad. But first, these two questions.
Okay, these two. Any country that has stopped high-skilled migrants from going abroad.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time historically when some countries had stopped. There was something called exit visa. Now, we nowadays take visa from the country where we want to go. But historically, Russia had that exit visa. You can't leave the country without having that visa. Why? Because your country needs you. And similarly, Singapore, for example, how they do it? They do it through conscription, through compulsory military training. Now, you'd ask me why an island country, single city country like Singapore needs military. Not for any other reason, but to create patriotism, the sense of patriotism installed in their youth, and some discipline, so that when they become adults, they themselves would be reluctant to go abroad. That is the way that countries have been stopping high-skilled migration. But I can't think of any country which is doing it by stopping their scientists and others unless they are put in prison. That can happen. Nazi Germany was doing that, not allowing its scientists to go abroad, put them on the gas chamber if they want to go. But that was the reason for large-scale exodus from Germany of scientists. So we do have such examples in history. Contemporary times, we may not have that kind of banning of migration, but one can look it up. I mean, it would be interesting if you can find some example. Brain drain compensated through money. It cannot be compensated through money. That what is brain drain? One will have to understand what is brain drain. Brain drain has two parts. One is the money that you are talking about, what I have invested in their education. My country has invested in terms of, subsidized education in IIT, for example, or All India Institute of Medical Science or Jawaharlal Nehru University, that you have very, nominal fees for your tuition, nominal fees for your residence, accommodation, meals, and so on. That is coming from the public exchequer, from the public tax that the people pay. That money is one part of the brain drain, but the other part is the skill. If you want doctors or engineers or teachers or nurses, if they go away, then your population does not get the benefit of their presence. No amount of money can compensate the presence of that skill. So full compensation of the brain drain is not possible. And we cannot measure it because we do not make such planning. We do not do analysis, how many jobs are needed, how many should be trained, in what time period, so that we have full employment rather than unemployment. Once you have the unemployment, of course they will go. And then whether you call it brain drain or brawn drain or brain in the drain or brain waste, is another matter. When IITs were set up for second 5-year plan, heavy industry, the 6 IITs were set up with foreign collaboration, that these engineers would come out one day and help. When they came, we did not plan for their employment. And we had massive graduate unemployment in India. The engineers of IITs were selling soaps. That became the terminology. What rescued them? NASA. NASA rescued them. The space research, the space competition between Russia and United States, that sucked in the IIT graduates into NASA. They gave them more education, trained them, made the engineers into scientists, and they lived there happily ever. They became American citizens. That is brain drain. But we today feel happy our IIT, 60% लोग जा रहे हैं IIT के, वहाँ जा रहे हैं. तो आप क्यों बना रहे हैं उनको? आपके ब्रिज तो सारे टूट रहे हैं. Your bridges are collapsing. You cannot even manage Commonwealth Games. So these questions have to be seen in applied form. कि उसका वो कहाँ पे आता है, brain drain के कारण क्या हो रहा है? We are only left with the average and the less than average people. If we have the best brains also, then the average will go up and our bridges will not collapse.
Yes, then I would like to invite Professor Shiv Prasad ji.
Thank you, Professor Pushpendra. It's an excellent talk by Professor Binod Khadria, and I really enjoyed. I think there are only 2 points I just wanted to raise. One is the process that happens internationally is also happening within the country, and the processes are similar, and the inequalities are similar in terms of migration. Yeah. And most of the time when we talk about international migrations, we only largely focus on highly skilled and skilled, not much on semi-skilled or unskilled. A lot of migrants who migrate to Gulf and others are mostly unskilled. And the remittances, including women, and most of the remittances come from them. And there is no policy within the country, forget about international policies, within the country, even to take care of them. This is one aspect. Second aspect is, if you look at even the crises that happened in Syria and others, most of the migrants are depressed migrants, and they're all unskilled. They were, in fact, you find the same thing in Palestine. You find the same thing in other countries where there are a lot of disputes. And in other words, what we need to also understand in this context is to look at even, especially I would say, because the skilled persons, at least they can tackle by themselves, whereas the others can't. So I think what we need is to look at the policies more rigorously with regard to these sections of population who are highly vulnerable. This is what I wanted to raise. Thank you very much.
One could not, agree more than what you have said. You see, there are parallels between international and internal migration, but both have their unique challenges also, because their sovereign countries are involved when international migration is talked about. When we are dealing with internal migration, we are not dealing with sovereign states. States means provinces. Then you have districts, you have blocks, you have others also, but states, interstate migration is something which is very, very much the topic in the context of COVID-19, because that is the challenge we faced. And I wrote in geography and you to say that the states behaved like independent countries. They were blocking their borders to these migrants who were walking hundreds of miles and making it more difficult for them than it was. So that I think one has to understand that we are in one single country, and under the Constitution of India, forgetting the article, maybe it is Article 19 only, that you can settle in any part of the country. The sons of the soil theory is, the fire is fanned by our own people only. Maharashtra for Marathas and Bihar for Biharis only. Biharis should go back there. Is something that is not tenable under the Constitution of India, must be conveyed in both letter and spirit and by law. That is what we are not doing. That we are just looking at the fun that is happening. It's a circus. It's a big circus that takes place, and we shed tears to show to others, and then we, in our drawing rooms, we laugh. We have the fun. So that is what hypocrisy is. Our policy, it reflects in our policy also. You are right that the unskilled and the semi-skilled, see, our policies are not there at all for the highly skilled. That is where I want to make this difference. The policies are all for the unskilled and the semi-skilled and the Gulf-oriented migrants. They are not for the migrants who are going to US, Germany, or other countries, the highly skilled, or Australia. There are some policies for students who are in between, but otherwise there is complete lack of policy. For so many years we have talked about policy. I was in one of the committees to make policies, but it just never progresses. It never takes place. So that is what is very important. The conflicts, the dilemmas have to be addressed. We don't address them. we are always shy. When its sovereignty comes, we don't call a spade a spade. Visa policies are never discussed in multilateral negotiations. Nobody wants to touch them, they're hot potatoes. When it comes to Syrian migration that you talked about, I have to correct you to say they are not unskilled. The Syrian refugees are also include highly skilled people. That is a misnomer that we think they are like Bangladeshi refugees or those who are coming from Nepal. No, they are highly educated and skilled refugees, but this situation there is highly volatile than across the border in India. There it is much more hostile, violent, and so on, because you have seen the kind of, the categories of the groups who are creating these kind of violent situations are all equipped with modern, modern weapons. So that one has to understand that the Syrian migrants include both unskilled, semi-skilled, and highly skilled. So one has to actually, and that's why Germany wanted them. Why do you think, Merkel wanted to host the Syrian refugees? Because with the brawn, the brain would also have come. And look at the civilization. The Middle East civilization is world's oldest civilization. That cannot be ended in a single day. Chinese civilization. We talk about Indian civilization. Why can't we talk about Asian civilization? We have to talk about, it was Indian subcontinent. We should talk about that. So there are issues, but we should not end only with talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Though we have already crossed 10 minutes for allotted time, there is one comment by one of my colleagues, Vivek Anand. If Vivek, it's compelling and you want to raise it, so then I invite you.
Okay, it was very enlightening talk, sir. And there's a friend of mine who's actually researching on what kind of situation the nursing profession or the professionals are facing in. She's from Kuwait, so she talked about Kuwait, about her experiences, but it's about the Gulf. Gulf has become a transit point for migrating to Europe or US, especially nursing people. And she was wondering why is this happening, and she was more into the fact that the work conditions or the work-life balance or the social protections in Europe and US are better than what is being offered in the Gulf countries. So this talk will definitely, she also attended this lecture, so this is going to help her think structurally why this is happening. And I also was very shocked to learn about the numbers that you quoted. I have been working in Sipan. I've been staying in a year, and this is also a place which has which comprises the top 10 districts in sending international migrants to Gulf, Africa, and the Scandinavian countries. Few migrants are into those countries also, and they have been talking that the situation in Gulf has gone bad now, and what they're blaming is on migrants from Bangladesh, that they have been competing with these people. Pakistanis and Bangladesh have played key role in lowering the wages that they were getting earlier on. So there is also this sense of demoralization. They are getting demoralized in migrating to international destinations. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I think all these points are quite valid. Well, Gulf has always been a transit point for the nurses, particularly. Nurse migration is not as simple as we think. There are deficiencies, and WHO norms are there. Ethical recruitment is something for which the employers find via media to recruit them and not directly to the countries where now Canada or UK would not like to hire them from deficit countries, or say India or South Pacific island countries where nurses are in short supply. But they can hire them from Gulf. So they will tell them, come Gulf में आ जाओ, वहाँ से ले लेंगे, है ना? So you find those via media happening. Well, working conditions and other labor laws do not exist there. UAE recently had the nurses were in the dock for some time. You know, they were taken there. I think more than 100 nurses were taken there, and then they found themselves unemployed. And it was I think the one collaborative hospital, collaboration of India UAE venture, that rescued them. So there are these, things that are happening, which is very much important, but people still take risk because the rewards for success are much higher than the probability of failure. So that's why they risk their lives, the nurses particularly. Competition, Bangladesh, Pakistan, lowering of wages, that would definitely happen. What can you do about it? That would happen. So you have to deliver better. You have to have better skills than Bangladeshis and Pakistanis. For example, if you go to Singapore, then there is a maid policy there. Household maids. Household maids have ranking. Filipinos are the highest paid. If you want to hire a Filipino maid for your household work, you have to be prepared to pay more, because the quality of their work and discipline and commitment is much higher than other nationalities. And then comes Indonesians, then come Pakistanis and Indians and so on. So there's a whole ranking of so that can also happen, provided if we can give our nurses the best education and the qualifications that they deserve. Here in India, the nurses are treated as unskilled. You go to Canada, there, you can't see a doctor. It's the nurse who treats you. Only if the nurse cannot treat you, you get an appointment with the doctor. England also, or even USA. I never saw my doctor when I was visiting Rutgers University in 1718. I had to go to the university hospital a number of times. It was the nurse who will talk to me and give me the medicine, and then say, you watch and tell me your results. If you are better, then I'll get this test done, that test done. And then if it still does not work, then we'll meet the doctor. And she will say, we will meet the doctor, not you will meet the doctor. So that is because the quality of their education for nurses is of very high order. And we have to lift the status of our nurses. That's what I can say to your friend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Khadria. We have some comments. Those are in the comment box. But we have to end. It's so enlightening, and all the comments, the way people have found it wonderful, enlightening, and so many, all those adjectives are there. So that also how enriching this experience has been for all of us who are here in this lecture. I would now invite my colleague Rakesh Ranjan to formally propose a vote of thanks.
It's your inspiration, sir. The accepting for the PowerPoint, the rest of the things were all extempore.
Yeah,
thank you, sir. And like I have this whole 1 hour 45 minutes or so, we thoroughly enjoyed actually all the information, all the issues. All the information were very much related to our like young scholar like me, and also to senior academicians. They must have. Sorry. Okay.
Can you unmute others, Rakesh?
I have actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Some problem. So, thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for this enriching lecture, and everyone has received a great knowledge about skill mobility and all issues related to migration, diaspora, and development. So thanks a lot. Thank you, sir. And thank you all the participants and thank you, Professor Pushpendra Kumar, for moderating this session. We had very good session today, and we hope to have all of you in future. We are going to organize another lecture very soon, so we'll share the advertisement, and then we hope to receive.
And one more information to everyone that this lecture was also live streamed on our TIS Patna Center's YouTube channel. So if you want to revisit it, so it will be available there. Okay, just search on the YouTube TIS Patna Center and you will find all the lectures under the migration lecture series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you, Professor Shiv-Prasad. This long time, and last we met in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
Yes,
Gave the
I think
occasion to
we know
meet
each
again.
other. We have met before, right?
Professor Shiv-Prasad was with the Central University of Hyderabad in Sociology Department,
Oh,
and
now
for
I know
some
I
time.
was on your board of school board.
Yes. I remember now.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember you very well.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll end here. Thank you so much. Thanks again, and Professor Chandrasekhar Bhatt and all other friends. Okay, and we'll meet again with the next, there is a justice lecture series. Under that, Professor Mohammad Sajjad from Aligarh Muslim University, he will be the next speaker, and this will be happening in the second week of August. So, and we will inform all the participants again. Thank you.